Hello crafty friends, it's Donna here from Donna is Playing Paper. Welcome to part 2 of One Paper Pack, 27 cards. A special welcome to our new friends who joined after part 1 of this series. We're going to make 17 more cards, this time thinking about how to let the papers lead the design. One of my all-time favourite card sketches for double-sided papers, and a few different ideas for using up the scraps right down to the very last bit. Here's what we're starting with. You may recognise this footage from the end of the last video. Video 1 was about adapting sketches to make them metric, although you could have used those sketches easily with imperial measurements too, because that was what was on them originally. As well as the leftover papers, don't forget that we can also use the packaging that it came in. That Mediterranean Summer 6x6 pack has a bunch of pretty strips on it, and the embossed cut apart sheet could be used for background layers to give your card some more dimension. Let's start with working with the papers. I've cut down and backed with green paper one of my leftovers that had this beautiful swag on it, and that's going to be the basis of a very simple card. I'm stamping Happy Birthday. It's previously had some stamp surgery, so I'm just laying it down on a piece of plastic to line it up, and then stamping onto some grid paper to double check before stamping it onto my paper. Despite my best intentions, I missed a little bit, and so I thought I'd leave in the footage there of what I do when things don't stamp correctly, and that is to get a very thin pen, much thinner than the actual design, and colour in anything that missed. To add some dimension, I found a couple of small cutter parts that fit the swag as far as the size goes, and I've popped those up with foam tape. Simple. Here's another example of letting the papers dictate the card design. I had a bunch of vases and some flowers left, both already in bouquets and individual flowers that I could make into flower arrangements of my own. And so I arranged those into 4 different bouquets. I have a few vases left over, and I'll deal with those in a little while. Then it's the simple matter of gluing them down onto a feature panel. I mixed up the size of my panel depending on my bouquet, and for most of them I glued the vase down flat and then popped the flowers up with some foam tape for dimension. For the backgrounds, I chose some of my favourite papers and matted those up. Altogether, I made 4 cards like this. But when it came to the 4th card, I didn't have quite enough of the backing paper. And so what I've chosen to do is to split that into 2 strips and pop my bouquet in the middle. It's still the same basic design, and it's still led by the bits that I had left over. The sentiment for this card comes from a pack called Rainbow Poppies, and I'm just backing that with a matching paper so that it stands out against the vase. Some of these cards have sentiments, and some have been left blank. I never get sick of looking at how beautiful and shiny these vases look with the embossing. Now here's my favourite thing to do with double-sided papers. I cut a piece that is at least 1/4 inch smaller all the way around than my card. About 1 centimetre smaller all the way around is excellent. And then I fold up one corner to reveal the beautiful backing paper. Then it's a simple matter of adding a sentiment and a feature panel somewhere on that fold. I've chosen to put my sentiment at an angle this time. I find when I glue this down, it's quite good just to pop a little bit of glue under that folded back bit to keep it steady. Then I've just popped up my feature panel with some foam tape, and the card is done. I think it's such a gorgeous, simple design that shows both sides of the paper and gives a really lovely card. Let's make a card with some more of those vases. I've used the Sweet Vines embossing folder to make a background, and a bit of paper from the pack for my shelf, and I'm just making a little bit of an arrangement of the vases with a sentiment. As simple as that. I've had these big black and white sentiments for a couple of years now, and I've picked over them really heavily, but there's still plenty left. I tend to use a liquid glue when I'm working with heavily embossed paper so that it can squish out into the gaps and give me a really good bond. I wonder if you had a favourite card from the first video. I did, and this was it. I thought it was such a great way to display this beautiful bouquet. And so, when it came to making the second card set and highlighting the images that I found in the pack, I've chosen to make a couple more of this card almost identical to the one that I made using the sketch in video 1. I'm starting to run out of papers. I have a lot of little scraps left and just a couple of pieces that are slightly bigger strips. And I'm going to show you an idea for using those bigger strips to stretch one thin strip across a whole card. It involves having a die that can be cut to make two symmetrical halves. In this case, I'm using a heart. My heart isn't symmetrical, but because I'm only going to use half of it, my final card will have symmetry in it. I've lined the heart up with the middle of the heart against the edge of my paper, and I've cut it out. I've used a little bit of press and seal here just to hold everything in place while I fiddle around on my desk. It just so happened that these two strips of paper that I had remaining were the same paper. So I'm going to use the back of one cut with the front of the other cut to have a card that has the same colours on both sides. I'm also going to extract all of those small pieces and stick them onto my card. But if what you had was a solid heart, that would work equally as well and be a lot less fiddly. Now I'm really getting down to the scraps. And my favourite way of using the really small pieces is to use some kind of cover plate die. I've got a circle and a rectangle one here, but there are so many fabulous dies out there that make quilt blocks, geometric designs, and all kinds of fun things. I've cut my frames from white card, and now I'm just putting together a little bit of a jigsaw of small scraps and then running them through my die cutter. There are two different ways that you can do this, and I like to do both so that I use up all of my paper. One is to make a thick frame and put some double-sided adhesive on the back before slotting the pieces into it. I have a nice wide double-sided adhesive that I'm using here, but if you don't have it, honestly, you can just run strips across the back of the whole thing. It's absolutely fine, just takes a tiny bit longer. Once I have almost the whole back of my cover plate covered, it's just a matter of slotting in all the little rectangles. Because I've used double-sided tape, I can peel off the back, and this whole panel is ready to stick to my card base, all in one. I'm going to make a second similar card at the same time. I'm using a single frame for this card, but that means that I now have 3 frames worth of white card rectangles, and I'm going to use those for this next card. I'm gluing together the 3 rectangles and then putting the coloured paper on top before gluing that into my frame. This time, my little rectangles stick up nice and proud, and this looks great as well. In actual fact, once I'd done this first one to show you, I went through and layered them all up in a little bit of a production line, and now I'm just going to stick them all in. The sentiments once again come from that really rainbow sentiment sheet, that one piece of paper that I took with me to Australia. It's still going strong. I've used exactly the same technique for the circle card, so I'm not going to show you the construction of these cards. The only thing that I did differently was that I took a great big sentiment stamp that says happy birthday, and I stamped happy onto one and birthday onto the other. Then I took another one of my rainbow poppy sentiment strips and cut that in half, and I've added the birthday and the happy so that each of them is a full sentiment. By now, I'm down to the real dregs. I have just a couple of pieces of paper left, but what I do have is the cover sheet for the 6x6 papers, and we're going to use that to make these next couple of cards. First of all, I need to get the usable portions. I won't use the black strip in the middle, and I won't use the couple of strips that have the barcode across them, but other than that, it's fair game. I'm also cutting up the last of a couple of little pieces of paper that I have to add to the cover sheet. Next, I've cut a square of white cardstock, which is the same width as my card. I've cut that diagonally through the middle, no special angle, just the one that pleased me, and I'm adding some double-sided tape to the diagonal edge. I'm using the lines on my grid mat to get the first strip really straight, and then I'm adding the others along, parallel to it. I'll add a little bit more double-sided tape to the back of these to hold them in position, and then add the other half of the diagonally cut paper to the other end. Once again, using the lines on my grid mat to line it up straight. I'll trim the excess off before I add this panel to my card. I had enough strips to make 2 cards the same way. For the second card, I chose to go straight rather than at a diagonal, and I used the very last of the flowers and leaves on this card too. At the end of all these cards, this is what I had left. 2 feature panels and a bunch of teeny tiny strips. Perhaps I could have kept going from there, but that's enough cards for today. Here's a quick look at all 17 cards that I made in this video. Feel free to go back and watch the first video to see the rest of the cards. Until next time, stay safe, and I'll be back soon with more cards. Bye for now.